Hate crimes against the Asian American community have been increasing, sadly, over the past year. In fact, hate crimes against Asian Americans rose 149% from 2019 to 2020. That's according to research released earlier this month by the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at California State University. And this has had a huge impact in the country, and it's been a huge conversation. And I have somebody who's willing to give me some time to talk with me about this today. Kane Ma, who's a former basketball player at the University of North Carolina. He's a former Tar Heel. And Kane, we'll get into something you shared with the world about an experience you had. But how are you doing first? Let me ask you, how's everything going on with you?
Dexter, thank you so much for having me on the show. Very honored, and it's always a crazy time. It seems like that's the appropriate answer these days, But mentally and physically, I'm doing well, and just taking things day by day.
Kane, as I said, there's a lot going on in terms of the world and awareness that needs to be brought forward to things that are going on within your community as an Asian American. And I mentioned you were a former basketball player at the University of North Carolina, but recently you shared something on LinkedIn, the platform of LinkedIn, where you talked about an experience you had around a hate crime. Could you share with our viewers what that experience was?
Yeah, so this happened a year after I graduated. I actually went overseas for a year to play my lone year of pro ball in China. Upon coming back, I went back into town. There's a UNC Duke game. It was at UNC. Got the win. And after, I was catching up with, old friends and teammates. I was on the phone with another friend at some point in the night, and then I was told to come to another street, Macaulay Street, which was a few minutes from where I was currently at. So I started walking over there, and as soon as I turn onto the street, there's three guys walking from the opposite end, and then that's kind of when things escalated. When they kind of confronted me, they're asking what I was doing there, I'm backing up now because they're coming at me with some type of aggressive intent, and racial slurs start flying left and right. They start picking up the pace in which they're coming at me, and then one of the guys says, "What, you're not gonna do some kung fu on us?" And that's it's in my mind is translations for we're about to attack you. You're not gonna protect yourself, right? So the next moment, I get put into a chokehold, and then the next moment, I'm waking up off the ground, and then touch my face. I realize I'm losing a lot of blood, and I need to get to the hospital. So I'm scrambling, calling my friends. One of them picks me up, takes me to the ER that night. I got diagnosed with a broken nose, concussion, and then I had a skull fracture that went from top of my head to under my eye. Doctor said no physical activity for 4 months, or at least until your head healed. And so that made it tough for me to try to get back overseas, just not being able to do anything. So that was really tough on me. And then, really, the physical battle was tough, but I think mentally it was even worse, just because, a lot of nights I would just wake up just in full body cold sweats, and stuff like that. I just knew it was a lot mentally for me. So, moving forward, I'm trying to figure out what happened. I end up finding out who the guys were by asking around. And that's when I reported to the police. And so, the police, does his, investigation, brings everybody in for questioning. And then after that, he tells me, hey, look, man, this is, your word versus theirs. And since there's three of them and one of you, you're basically on the short end of the stick. And I didn't quite get that. And, I'm sending medical records, anything I can to be like, look at me, right? And so as the weeks go by, and I'm sure those guys had legal representation from the get-go. The investigator ends up telling me, they told me, obviously it's out of self-defense, but they admitted to putting their hands on you. They admitted to putting you in a chokehold. But, they said that's all that they did. You became unconscious, then you fell. And that story doesn't line up at all based on the doctors that I had talked to. Because, when I at the ER, the doctor at the ER, and then all of the follow-up appointments I have with the ENT to make sure I'm healing correctly, they're all saying, yeah, by the look of your injuries and how your skull looks, you didn't fall. Like, these dudes bashed your head into the ground and struck you multiple times. So the fact that, where like the story's not adding up at all is very frustrating for me. And then, at this point, I'm looking for some legal representation to see if I can fight this. And unfortunately, they all said the same thing: is he said, she said, and this is just tough for you because you're just outnumbered. And at this point, I'm very just discouraged.
Would be understandably so, Kane. I'm glad you shared that, because I know reliving any kind of trauma can be hard. But it was important. You shared it on the LinkedIn post. You're even sharing it with me now through this story. But I have to ask, because I think the thing that struck me, and there's another part of the story we'll get to, obviously, but I think the thing that struck me was you went to the police, which I think a lot of times victims of anything, sometimes it can be tough to do that, especially for people of color. And these men admitted, these white men who attacked you admitted that they had you in a chokehold, and still there are obviously some visible injuries to you, and there was doctors and medical proof. What were you feeling when the police officer told you this kind of is what it is? It's their word against yours, even
Right.
though they admitted to it. This is you have to almost just deal with it.
Yeah, it made me feel like I was the bad guy almost. The way that I was even being talked to by the police or anybody just to try to seek some justice. It felt like I was being inconvenienced the whole time. It felt like I shouldn't have went on the street. It felt like, it just seemed like every action that I took or engaged in during this situation was like, you're not. I don't know quite sure if you're in the right to, even complain about this. Like, it just seemed like very cards stacked against me, and like I didn't have much room to budge.
Kane, was that your first ever experience with that maybe level of veracity in terms of hate because of who you are and what you look like? Had you ever experienced anything like that before?
Throughout my life, especially growing up in NC and going to different parts of North Carolina, racism and racist remarks and discrimination has always kind of been a part of my life. The term microaggressions is what, it's a term that I didn't even hear of until this year. I never heard of that term, but that term kind of describes my childhood and upbringing in a lot of ways. There's a lot of jabs. Some are with ill intent. Others are just out of ignorance or, just not knowing. But, I was a part of the bad end of racist comments, I would say almost every day of my life, and especially being a basketball player, often I was the only, Asian on the court. In the gym, there would be a AU tournament with, 150 kids in it, and I'd be the only, Asian kid in there. So, it was, it was constant, but, it's just something that I think, for better or worse, was kind of normalized in my life.
In your post, you said 2 months later, in a local bar, you were approached by the same attackers and told by one of the attackers that white people have power. When I hear that, Kane, and I read your post, I said, wow, the audacity and the privilege to come back and say that after you had reportedly had a traumatic experience. What did you feel in that moment? Was it fear again? Was it anger? What was the feeling for you in that moment when they came back again in the bar?
Yeah, so my sister also went to UNC, and she graduated 2019. So this is the same year. This is a couple months later. I'm back in town to help her celebrate her graduation and be there for her. And then one night, I'm kind of catching up with some old friends, and we're leaving a bar on the way home. We just walk out on the way home, walking home, and I just so happened to bump into those three guys again, right? And as soon as we lock eye contact, both parties know who the other are, immediately. And so there's a little bit of a back and forth for 45 seconds to a minute, and they end it with the words "white people have power," just shouted it at me. And when you hear something like that, it's especially after what I just had to go through with the situation, how with the police and everything, I just felt the most powerless I've ever felt in my life, and just speechless, just because it's almost like, well, maybe they do.
I can understand it. And to take on that power, Kane, in some way, when you look at this, you were an athlete, a basketball player at UNC, where basketball is beloved, in Chapel Hill, and part of that Chapel Hill community. And you had this experience. When you say, you're a successful young man, you've had this happen to you, but when this happens to you, in these times, does this make you more concerned for your Asian brothers and sisters who maybe don't have the same status that are out there, that, hey, this can happen to people who look like me all across the country as well, too?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the one thing that I hope that my post did have, the effect that it had at the very least, was just simply awareness. Like I said, I don't think a lot of people think this exists. And I hope it served a vehicle for people to speak out, for others to speak out as well. When, as you probably know, when one person in the room becomes vulnerable, others are more willing to open up about their own vulnerabilities. And I hope a similar effect is taken here, where people's stories are told and heard. So,
are you encouraged about where the conversation is right now in this country surrounding racism and Asian hate? We've seen the hashtag Stop Asian Hate, and that movement sort of growing over the last couple of weeks and months. Where do you think this conversation is going in America? Not even just in America, even in sports, right? Because we've had some things that we've seen around things in sports. Jeremy Lin has been open about it. Other players from other backgrounds and the minorities have been open about the hate and standing together as all. Where do you think this conversation is going in this country?
Well, my hope is that it goes towards a place of education and just more awareness, and kind of more introspective thinking, because at the end of the day, while things may happen at a national level, the change still happens at the individual level. So I'm glad to see movements like this, similar to the Black Lives Matter movement. I think these things are amazing vehicles for awareness and amazing vehicles for real change. But I hope, the educational component of it is backed up to where, individuals can look at themselves in the mirror and ask tough questions. So,
you made a conscious decision to post this on LinkedIn and not other social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. You consciously posted this on LinkedIn. Can you talk about also why you did that? And then also what the response, you said the response has been pretty positive from people, but what it's been like seeing that positive response and interacting with those folks on the LinkedIn platform?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, as we all know, is a place for just to connect and network. And so naturally, there's going to be a lot of decision makers and executives and basically leaders, right? So I felt like that platform was a good choice in terms of exposure to people who had a leadership position. They're driving many individuals day to day. So I think the awareness for them to first know that it's happening, and then two, be encouraged to have conversations like that within their own organizations, I think can be far reaching, So, yeah.
You're getting that support from people on LinkedIn. You're seeing the positive comments, but you also had support from your UNC basketball family. How did they support you during that time and continue to support you going forward?
Yeah, so I actually was on a podcast with them earlier this week. But ever since the incident happened, Coach Hubert Davis, he's an assistant for the varsity team. He is someone who I had a deep relationship with while over my 4 years at Carolina, and so I felt most comfortable initially telling him about what had happened, and just purely for support, and just advice on how to deal with it mentally, and then moving. He was able to send me options to get legal representation. Obviously, there's just so much you can do in his position, but at the end of the day, it's always, every time I go back there, whether it's for a game or to watch the practice, it's always with open arms. So that means a lot to me.
I'm definitely sure that it does, and it has, and it's good to have that support. Now this post is out there, you've done this, you're willing to talk to me about it, which is beautiful. You talked to me about what you hoped that people would take from the post, but do you feel like people are taking that from the post as we move forward, or taking what they should from the post in terms of positivity as we move forward?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, I won't go into what all the comments say. There's both sides in any situation, but especially in the direct messages I've got, it's been a lot of support, and even a lot of that vulnerability I was speaking of earlier is, people opening up about similar experiences they have, and I think that's just fundamental to the human connection. What makes us human is that we can connect to each other at a very deep and emotional level. And so I think that's some of the most important experiences you can have with others. So I'm happy to see that is being more openly said, because I think that like I said, the individual level is where real change happens.
Absolutely true. That's Kane Ma, former University of North Carolina basketball player. Kane, thank you so much for sharing with me and being open and joining us on Sideline Stories. We really appreciate it, man.
Yeah. Thank you again, Dexter, and looking forward to connecting again.